Welcome to Lecture 8. Today I'd like to talk about some reasons why many healthy people are dying from COVID-19. While initially this was thought to be a disease predominantly seen in the elderly, it's now becoming clear that many young people develop severe symptoms of COVID-19 and in some cases are dying from this disease. It's true that we're detecting more cases, and since the denominator is growing, we're now seeing a higher case rate in young folks, even people in their 20s and 30s. It's possible in some of these individuals, even though they are apparently healthy, they have underlying health conditions that predispose them to becoming more severely ill when they're exposed to this virus. So let's look at some data. This is provided by the CDC, and this table shows the number of COVID deaths in the last, from between February and March 28, 2020. This number is a little off from the actual number of deaths because here the deaths are in people who've already been issued a death certificate. But the point really from this slide or from this graph that I want to make is that while a lot of deaths are in folks over 75 years of age, a number of people between 25 and 55 are also dying from COVID. And in these cases, many of these cases are related to developing severe pneumonia and dying from COVID-related issues. So you look at the number or the percentage of people or the age distribution of people admitted to the ICU. So they're admitted to the ICU only if they develop severe symptoms of disease. Again, severe symptoms develop in the elderly. Certainly, that's not in question at all. But the hospitals are seeing cases in people who are young. And in many cases, these people are extremely healthy, but they are developing severe symptoms of disease. So why is that? Is there a specific reason, or are there specific reasons why these people, healthy people, are getting very ill? I like this slide from Siddiqui et al., who divided the illness into three phases or three stages. So usually you get infected with the virus several days before you develop symptoms. Stage 1 or the early infection stage of the disease is when you start developing symptoms, and the typical symptoms are fever, dry cough, diarrhea, headache. Hopefully you just have mild symptoms and you recover. During this phase is the phase when you have the most viral replication. So the virus comes into the cells and they replicate to high levels. Hopefully your innate immune system is able to get rid of the infection. In stage 2 is the pulmonary phase, or where you start developing lung symptoms. Here you might have shortness of breath, you might have abnormal chest imaging, you might have other factors or that are going up or low that indicate that you're having pulmonary infection and that the system is not really functioning that well. And stage 3 is the hyperinflammation phase, or the most critical phase. So if you go from stage 1 to stage 2, again, hopefully you recover. But if not, you go into this hyperinflammation phase. And here there are elevated levels of several markers, and these markers have been described for many illnesses. So it's not just COVID-19. So you could have severe symptoms from SARS or from influenza, from other conditions that cause acute respiratory disease syndrome. And there's some commonalities in all of these illnesses. You can develop systemic shock and cardiac failure and eventually die from the illness. So really what I want to get into is why are some people getting really ill who are, otherwise healthy? You can imagine if someone's elderly and even in stage 1, you are in, say, an immunosuppressed state, or your immune system is not functioning as well. That's why you go rapidly from stage 1 to stage 2 to stage 3. Also, say you have conditions, so you're immunosuppressed because of, say you have cancer or you have some other treatment that's causing your immune system to not function as well. It's also possible that that's why you're progressing. That's why you are at higher risk compared to someone who's healthy. But why is someone who's healthy going to stage 3 quickly, or in a matter of 2 to 3 weeks, going from mild symptoms to developing very significant symptoms and potentially dying from the disease? So I'd like to talk about a few possibilities why healthy people are getting severe disease. One possibility to consider is, are there genetic differences in people who develop severe COVID but have no underlying disease like diabetes or heart or lung disease, compared to those people who have mild or no disease. That's entirely possible. So we know now that SARS coronavirus 2 also binds the ACE2 receptor, similar to its related family member SARS coronavirus. So it uses the ACE receptor. So it's a lock between the spike protein of the SARS and the ACE2 receptor for the virus to enter any cell. So in my lecture on viruses, I had mentioned that the sole goal of a virus is to come in efficiently into a cell, use the host cell machinery, make more copies of itself, and ship out or send out many more infected copies of the virus. So that's an efficient virus. But say, for example, a healthy individual, we don't know this yet, has a genetic variation of this ACE2 receptor. So instead of typical entry like you would in a healthy individual, this person with genetic variation might have enhanced entry of virus into the cell. So that's one possibility. It's possible that that gene variations in the ACE2 gene or any other gene, there could be many genes that help enhance the virus getting in, enhance the virus getting out, and all kinds of combinations. Maybe you have a mutation or variation in some of the cytokines that are released from the cell. So you are actually a healthy individual with that variation, might be pumping out more of a good or a bad thing, and that's why you're getting more severely ill. Another possibility is in the immune system. So this is on my lecture on T cells. I had mentioned that there are these molecules called MHC molecules, and these MHC molecules are critical in presenting small portions of the virus or polypeptides so that the T cell can recognize it and kill it. But say you have a variation or you have a specific type of HLA gene. So we've all inherited specific HLA genes from our parents. So from our mother and our father. So say you have a variation that makes you more susceptible to T cells responding either too well or not enough. That's also one genetic variation that you could have. And maybe in people who are getting sick, they have an HLA differentiation or a genetic difference in their HLA genes. One possibility to consider is the role of surfactants. What are surfactants? Surfactants are critical ingredients produced by a type of cell known as a pneumocyte or a type 2 pneumocyte, and these pneumocytes are present in the alveoli of the lung. So surfactants form a film in the alveolus of the lung, and it acts as a defense or a first barrier against entry of pathogens. One other thing it does, it also stabilizes the air-exposed interface. So you want there to be substantial air, and it prevents the alveoli from collapsing. So I guess you could think about it as surfactant better allows a lung to expand and contract. So what happens in disease? So neonates or children who are born actually have immature type 2 pneumocytes. So they have surfactant deficiencies. So they then have the alveoli collapse or need to be provided with surfactant alternatives to help keep the alveoli healthy. In acute respiratory disease syndrome, what we're discussing today, you can also have alveolar collapse. So say you have depletion or the amount of surfactant is now depleted in patients who were otherwise healthy and now are in ARDS. You could have alveolar collapse. So that could be one of the reasons why people who are relatively healthy are developing ARDS and eventually going on to die, that you have surfactants depleted. And we're still waiting to find out if that's one of the reasons why people develop serious symptoms. The last possibility I'd like to discuss today is whether a cytokine storm might be responsible for severe illness seen in healthy patients. So you know that viruses enter the lung, they replicate in cells of the lung initially, and the innate immune system kicks in. The innate immune system kicks in within hours of an infection. While there's replication in lung cells and antigen-presenting cells, these cells then start secreting molecules or cytokines, but this typically happens within a day or two after infection. So it's unlikely that the innate immune system is likely to be playing a role in the cytokine storm. But within a few days or within a week, what kicks in is the adaptive immune response. So in my lecture on both T and B cells, I talked about how B cells can get activated and secrete antibodies, but B cells can also interact with antigen-presenting cells and the other component, which are T cells. And T cells see small portions of the virus presented by an antigen-presenting cell and gets activated. So all of the T cells and B cells can also secrete these cytokines. And these cytokines, for the most part, are thought to be good and should help control the infection. But you might have a lot of activation of both T and B cells and antibodies and other associated products. So while the immune system is supposed to be clearing out the infection, you might have too much of a good thing. So it's always this balance between the virus coming in, the immune system responding, and in many cases, if the immune system is effective and able to shut off quickly, the infection is controlled. But maybe in healthy people, they're just pumping out a little too much. And that little too much is what sends or pushes an otherwise healthy person into developing acute respiratory disease syndrome. So there's data from multiple studies on other infections to suggest that this is what is happening. So in work done on SARS coronavirus and MERS, why people are getting sick is still not completely understood. So these are infections that happened close to 15 years ago in the case of SARS, and in MERS maybe 8 or 9 years ago. Early studies do show increases in cytokines, but it's not definitive. In these patients, it's also known, or here's a study actually from someone, from a group in China that looked at clinical features of patients who were infected with the novel SARS coronavirus 2. And in these patients as well, they have elevations of many cytokines, probably leading to the activation of, say, T cell responses. But at this stage, further studies are necessary to fully characterize the response. And in the upcoming months, there will be several publications out that either support the case of a cytokine storm being responsible for severe illness or don't. But it's entirely possible in some people a cytokine storm is the major factor responsible for causing severe illness. In other people, it might be surfactant deficiency. And yet another subset of people, it might be genetic variations or something else that we haven't even considered yet. So I just would like you all to keep an open mind and realize there are multiple reasons why healthy people can also get sick. And I've discussed today 3 or 4 factors that might be involved in or provide you some insight into why healthy patients develop severe illness. Thank you again for your attention. And on each slide, I've listed some references that would be helpful. So if you're interested in understanding a little bit more about the cytokine storm, for example, please take a look at this Medcram video if you are more interested. Thanks again.